Is palpable. A man in Guinea suspected of having the gruesome disease was left lying in a city street for hours. Passers-by too scared to help, medical resources stretched thin.
Let them come and take him from here, because we are afraid.
More than 930 people have died in the outbreak. The military now helping combat the spread of Ebola in Sierra Leone. Liberian soldiers are clamping down on travelers. No one with a fever allowed in or out of the country. And in Spain, health officials reassuring the public there is little risk of Ebola spreading from an infected priest evacuated from Liberia, now in isolation at a Madrid hospital.
He is stable with fever, and the most important thing is that Father Miguel is not hemorrhaging. This is a sign of a positive prognosis.
The World Health Organization will soon decide if the Ebola outbreak is an international public health emergency, which could initiate a more global response. The CDC is operating on its highest alert level, the first time since the 2009 swine flu pandemic. The agency's director briefed representatives on Capitol Hill.
We, with our partners, have been able to stop every Ebola outbreak to date, and I'm confident that if we do what works, we will stop this one also. But it won't be quick, and it won't be easy.
Dr. Thomas Frieden says tried and true infection control methods, diagnosis, isolation, and tracing patient contacts are the best way to end the outbreak. Cindy Sharp, Associated Press.
As the medical world continues to grapple with Ebola, there are growing calls for experimental medicines to be used more widely. 2 American aid workers infected with the virus appear to be improving after receiving an unapproved medicine, ZMapp, ahead of their evacuation back to the United States.
This is an emergency compassionate use situation. This is not a well-controlled laboratory study. A lot of work remains to be done to see how it worked and why and how quickly. The apparent speed of recovery was faster than I would have expected, so there may be a lot of things that we still don't understand about the virus.
The antibodies were originally harvested from mice that had been injected with parts of the virus. Experiments on monkeys suggest the antibody cocktail may reduce fatalities when given after exposure to the virus. The proteins are then grown in specially modified leaves of tobacco, which act like a photocopier, reproducing larger amounts.
I do agree there's no vaccine. Treatment is experimental. The real way of stopping it is by transmission of the virus, which we know quite well how to do. It's just spreading that message and then providing basic supportive care to people who are being treated at the moment. What we must remember, it's a very isolating and stigmatizing disease, and people deserve to be treated with care and concern, which is what we're all committed to.
The Spanish government is sending a specially equipped plane to Liberia to evacuate a priest who is infected with the virus in the capital city, Monrovia. The World Health Organization will announce on Friday how it plans to slow down or halt the global spread of a virus that has claimed 900 lives in West Africa since February.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I just had an opportunity to get a full briefing from my entire team across administrations, across agencies, on the aggressive steps that we are taking to fight the Ebola epidemic, to stop the epidemic at its source in West Africa, but also to make sure that we're doing everything we need to do to prevent an outbreak here in the United States. As I've said from the start of this outbreak, I consider this a top national security priority. This is not just a matter of charity, although obviously the humanitarian toll in the countries that are affected in West Africa are extraordinarily significant. This is an issue about our safety. It is also an issue with respect to the political stability and economic stability of this region. And so it is very important for us to make sure that we are treating this the same way that we would treat any other significant national security threat. And that's why we've got an all-hands-on-deck approach, from DOD to public health to our development assistance, our science teams. Everybody is putting in time and effort to make sure that we are addressing this as aggressively as possible. I know that the American people are concerned about the possibility of an Ebola outbreak, and Ebola is a very serious disease. And the ability of people who are infected to carry that across borders is something that we have to take extremely seriously. At the same time, it is important for Americans to know the facts. and that is that because of the measures that we've put in place, as well as our world-class health system, and the nature of the Ebola virus itself, which is difficult to transmit, the chances of an Ebola outbreak in the United States is extremely low. Procedures are now in place to rapidly evaluate anybody who might be showing symptoms. We saw that with the response of the airplane in Newark, and how several hospitals across the United States have been testing for possible cases. In recent months, we've had thousands of travelers arriving here from West Africa, and so far only one case of Ebola has been diagnosed in the United States, and that's the patient in Dallas. Our prayers are obviously with him and his family. We have learned some lessons, though, in terms of what happened in Dallas. We don't have a lot of margin for error. The procedures and protocols that are put in place must be followed. One of the things that we discussed today was how we can make sure that we're spreading the word across hospitals, clinics, any place where a patient might first come in contact with a medical worker, to make sure that they know what to look out for, and they're putting in place the protocols and following those protocols strictly. And so we're going to be reaching out not only to governors and mayors and public health officials in states all across the country, but we want to continue to figure out how we can get the word out everywhere so that everybody understands exactly what is needed to be done. Meanwhile, at the federal level, we're constantly reviewing and evaluating the measures that we already had in place to see if there are additional improvements. We continue to look at any additional steps that can be taken to make sure that the American people are safe, which is our highest priority. And finally, we had a discussion about what we're doing on site in West Africa. There's been already extraordinary work done by the Department of Defense in conjunction with the CDC in standing up isolation units and hospital beds. We are making progress. The environment is difficult because the public health system there has very few resources and is already extraordinarily fragile. And I'll be very honest with you, although we have seen great interest on the part of the international community, we have not seen other countries step up as aggressively as they need to. And I said at the United Nations, and I will repeat, that this is an area where everybody has to chip in and everybody has to move quickly in order for us to get this under control. Countries that think that they can sit on the sidelines and just let the United States do it, that will result in a less effective response, a less speedy response, and that means that people die. And it also means that the potential spread of the disease beyond these areas in West Africa becomes more imminent. So I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure on my fellow heads of state and government around the world to make sure that they are doing everything that they can to join us in this effort. We've got some small countries that are punching above their weight on this, but we've got some large countries that aren't doing enough. And we want to make sure that they understand that this is not a disease that's going to discriminate. And this is something that all of us have to be involved with. So the bottom line is that we're doing everything that we can to make sure, number one, that the American people are safe. I'm confident that we're going to be able to do that. But we're also going to need to make sure that we stop this epidemic at its source. And we're profoundly grateful to all our personnel, our medical personnel, our development personnel, our military personnel who are serving in this effort. It's because of their professionalism, their dedication, their skill, that we are going to be able to get this under control. But this is a faraway place with roads that in many cases are impassable, areas that don't have even one hospital. We're having to stand up essentially a public health infrastructure in many of these areas that haven't had it before. And that requires an enormous amount of effort. I'm very grateful for the people who are on the front lines making this work. It's a reminder once again of American leadership, but even with all the dedicated effort that our American personnel are putting in, they're going to be, they need to be joined by professionals from other countries who are putting up similar effort and similar resources. And so I hope they're going to be paying attention over the next several weeks so we can get on top of this. All right? Thank you very much. Well, I just explained to them that the nature of this disease, the good news is that it's not an airborne disease. We are familiar with the protocols that are needed to isolate and greatly reduce the risks of anybody catching this disease, but it requires us to follow those protocols strictly. And that's exactly what we are in the process of doing. And the CDC is familiar with dealing with infectious diseases and viruses like this. We know what has to be done, and we've got the medical infrastructure to do it. But this is an extraordinarily virulent disease when you don't follow the protocols. And so the key here is just to make sure that each step along the way, whether it's a hospital admissions desk, whether it is the doctors, the nurses, public health officials, that everybody has the right information. If they have the right information and they are following those protocols, then this is something that we're going to be able to make sure does not have the kind of impact here in the United States that a lot of people are worried about. But that requires everybody to make sure that they stay informed. Most particularly, we've got to make sure that our health workers are informed. We're also going to be working on protocols to do additional passenger screening, both at the source and here in the United States. All of these things make me confident that here in the United States, at least, the chances of an outbreak of an epidemic here are extraordinarily low. But let's keep in mind that as we speak, there are children on the streets dying of this disease, thousands of them. And so obviously my first job is to make sure that we're taking care of the American people. But we have a larger role in that. We also have an obligation to make sure that those children and their families are safe as well, because ultimately the best thing we can do for our public health is also to extend the kind of empathy, compassion, and effort so that folks in those countries as well can be rid of this disease. All right? Thank you very much.
Afternoon, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed your weekend as much as I did. Certainly was a lot of exciting playoff baseball to watch on television. So, World Series?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I noticed. Congratulations to the Baltimore Orioles on their strong performance. It was excellent. Excellent. So, it's not over yet. So, we'll see. Other than a little frivolity around playoff baseball, Julie, I don't have any announcements. So, we can go directly to your questions.
Thanks, Josh. I had a couple different topics. First of all, I wanted to see if we could get some White House reaction to the Supreme Court turning away the appeals from 5 states that were seeking to prohibit gay marriage.
Mm-hmm. We've seen those reports. I don't have a specific reaction to.
21 días de vida. Señora, ¿me puedo topar aquí a ver si tengo fiebre? Está mal. Ah, pues eso tiene que ser el ébola que tenemos.
¿En serio?
Sí. Eso mata. ¿Que me voy para dónde? Sí. Y se le pega así a la gente. Sí. Me duele la cabeza y tos. Fiebre también. Me duele el cuerpo entero. ¿Cómo el ébola? Que yo tengo el ébola. Tópeme aquí, rápido. Por favor. Para yo decirle si estoy caliente.
Es que yo no
¿No sabes si yo estoy caliente? Tópeme.
¿No me aceptas que semanas?
Sí, ya me está diciendo mi mamá que tengo el ébola. Seguro.
No llegamos aquí.
¿Crees tú? Yo voy para el médico ahora. Eso tiene que ser el ébola. Pues yo no puedo estar ante la gente, eso no se pega así. ¿Un poquito de qué? Ella dice que estoy un poquito caliente, sí.
Now. For the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the facts on Ebola. It'll take just 3 minutes. But first, today, given what we know, you should have no concerns about Ebola at all. None, I promise. Unless a medical professional has contacted you personally and told you of some sort of possible exposure, fear not. Do not listen to the hysterical voices on the radio and the television or read the fear-provoking words online. The people who say and write hysterical things are being very irresponsible. Here are the facts. A man contracted Ebola overseas. Tragically, he was dying in a Texas hospital. He was at his most contagious while showing the most severe symptoms. That's how Ebola works. And a healthcare worker at the hospital got the virus from him. She is doing well, she says, Skyping with her family from isolation just yesterday, saying she's blessed to have so much support and such great medical care. The CDC director told us, all of us, yesterday that he did indeed expect other healthcare workers at that hospital who treated that one dying patient to contract the virus. And that's now happened. Another healthcare worker at that same hospital now has Ebola. They tell us they're transferring her to Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. Now, before she showed symptoms, she flew from Cleveland to Dallas on Frontier Airlines. They say she should not have done that, but she did. But as we all now know, if you don't show symptoms, you are not contagious. She did not show symptoms, according to the doctors. Still, medical professionals are contacting everyone who was on that plane to make sure each person is okay. The CDC director says chances are very slim that any of those passengers is sick. Now, big picture, and this is important. You have to remember that in the middle of all of this, you have to remember that there is politics in the mix. With midterm elections coming, the party in charge needs to appear to be effectively leading. The party out of power needs to show that there is a lack of leadership. So the president has canceled a fundraising trip and is holding meetings, and his political opponents are accusing his administration of poor leadership. For the purpose of this fact dissemination exercise, those matters are immaterial. Again, these are the facts. We do not have an outbreak of Ebola in the United States, nowhere. We do have 2 healthcare workers who contracted the disease from a dying man. They are isolated. There is no information to suggest that the virus has spread to anyone in the general population in America. Not one person in the general population in the United States. Suggestions have been made publicly that leaders and medical professionals may be lying to us. Those suggestions are completely without basis in fact. There is no evidence of any kind of which we at Fox News are aware that leaders have lied about anything regarding Ebola. I report to you with certainty this afternoon that being afraid at all is the wrong thing to do. Being petrified, and that's a quote, is ridiculous. The panic that has tanked the stock market and left people fearful that their children will get sick at school is counterproductive and lacks basis in fact or reason. There is no Ebola spreading in America. Should that change, our reporting will change. But there is nothing to indicate that it will. Best advice for you and your family at this moment, get a flu shot. Unlike Ebola, flu is easily transmitted. Flu, along with resulting pneumonia, killed 52,000 Americans last year alone. A flu shot will reduce your chance of getting flu. So get one. We're going to a team of Fox News correspondents now, working different angles of the Ebola situation, beginning with our correspondent Alicia Acuna, who's outside the hospital in Dallas. Alicia, what do we know about this second healthcare worker to have contracted the virus from the dying patient?